The 2019 MacBook Pro. It's sleek, it's extremely powerful, it's controversial, and it's a completely different experience to create content on than what I'm used to. Because I'm used to this, the Microsoft Surface Book 2. It is also sleek, powerful, and controversial. And it has been an incredible device to work on. Ever since my initial review, I have done almost all of my work on the Surface Book, and it has proved to be a very capable device. The version I bought was the top spec model, and that has helped keep the device relevant with time. The GTX 1066GB chews through creative work. The 1TB NVMe SSD offers plenty of fast storage, and the touchscreen is actually super useful when working in Illustrator and Photoshop. And speaking of Illustrator and Photoshop, the Surface Dial and Pen can really enhance workflow with the way they can be customized and integrated with these Pro tools. It's almost the perfect workstation. Almost. Sprinkled throughout the time that I've been working with the Surface Book, there have been moments that left me thinking maybe I should consider a desktop computer, at least as a companion to my laptop. At first, the natural desktop to look at was the Surface Studio 2. After all, it was a similar experience to the laptop that I love. But after doing some research, it turned out to be a little too similar. Sure, the 8GB GTX 1070 and 32GB of RAM would be a nice upgrade, but the dated 7820 HQ CPU didn't offer anything substantially more powerful than I was already using. And I didn't want yet another device that inexplicably didn't have Thunderbolt 3 capability. I bounced around Dell's XPS line and Razer's offerings before taking a peek at what Apple had to offer. I would be giving up the portability and ability to easily work anywhere that made laptops attractive to me in the first place, in exchange for a powerful, seemingly well-received pro-level machine. The more I researched, the more sure I became that a Mac was going to be my next workstation machine. I was partially correct. Right before I purchased, Apple dropped this beauty, the 2019 MacBook Pro. So right here you might be saying to yourself, how on earth did you end up with another laptop after intending to purchase a desktop? And you wouldn't be the only one. Just about everyone I know had the same question, so here's my logic. It's no secret that I prefer to work on laptops, because they allow me to work in virtually any location I choose. High-performance desktops and all-in-ones, generally speaking, get set on a desk, and that's where they stay. Not to say that you can't move them, but it's certainly not as easy as picking up a laptop. If I purchased an iMac Pro, I would have set it in my office space, and used it for rendering and other heavy compute tasks, but the Surface Book would still be the primary machine that I worked on. I definitely wouldn't have gotten my $5,000 worth out of it using it in this way. And honestly, for it to be a true rendering powerhouse, it would need to be spec'd up to the 18-core version, and that's at least $8,100. And spending $8,100 for a computer that's primary function is to render would definitely qualify as a hair crazy. Especially when you consider that a really nice computer could be built with a 32-core Threadripper for about half of that. For me to get the best of both worlds, the MacBook was the easy choice for me. Here's the breakdown. I maxed out the MacBook with everything except the 4TB of storage, and yes, that means I also paid the $200 for the faster i9 that most people suggest not to do. The total was just shy of $4,000. The iMac Pro, with a similar performing 8-core Xeon and a Vega 64 graphics card, lands around $5,550. That comes to a $1,600 difference. If I repurpose that money into a Razer Core external GPU for $299 and a Vega 64, $399, that leaves me about $850 extra for a monitor. So now I can place the monitor and eGPU in my office and plug in when I need the extra oomph. Then I can just unplug and work freely from anywhere when I don't. And technically I can drag the eGPU places and work with the added power from just about anywhere. There are a few other bonuses as well. I see the keyboard issues that the MacBooks have been having as a plus, as now Apple has included it, even the new one, in its keyboard service program, and that gives me a 4-year warranty on the keyboard, which is way longer than on any other machine. In addition to that, Apple recently slashed the prices on internal storage options, making the 2 or 4 terabyte model much more reasonable to purchase. So now that I have the MacBook, what will happen to the Surface Book? While it is very difficult for the Surface Book to keep up when any workflow includes heavy CPU utilization, there is still a very important place for it in my workflow: asset creation. The MacBook can't come close to the pen and dial experience in Photoshop and Illustrator, and building everything on the Surface, dropping it on a Samsung T5 drive, and putting it all together on the Mac thus far has been an amazing experience. And that's not to say that I haven't done any rendering on the Surface Book 2, it's just that now, after working on several projects on both machines, I know which software works best for me and my workflow on which machine. For example, Photoshop and Illustrator are definitely better to work on the Surface Book 2. Even if you don't have a Surface Dial or Surface Pen, the touchscreen experience on the Surface Book 2 just feels like a more connected experience with Photoshop and Illustrator than on any other device that I've worked on. Adobe Premiere and After Effects are a very similar experience on both devices. And while the touchscreen on the Surface works really well with this software, I don't hate the MacBook's touch bar shortcuts. Playback on both devices is pretty smooth, and you really don't start to see dropped frames until you start to add on tons of effects. As far as rendering projects goes, there's not a huge difference in shorter projects, only separated by a few seconds. It's not until you get into hour-long renders that you really start to see the MacBook Pro pull ahead. If I only needed to render out one longer project, I would definitely choose the MacBook. If I needed multiple renders simultaneously, then I would use the Surface Book for the shorter ones. Which brings me to Lightwave, and another example on how these two machines can work together to tackle a workflow. Working in Modeler to create 3D assets with the Surface Pen, touchscreen, and keyboard shortcuts is just as fluid as you'd expect. When moving into layout and rendering, however, that is when it's time to move to the Mac. Since Lightwave's rendering engine still uses the CPU instead of the GPU, the quad-core 8-thread CPU in the Surface can't keep up with the 8-core 16-thread one in the Mac. To sum it all up, if you're a small or even a one-person team like myself, and you have either a Mac or a Windows machine, and you're thinking about switching because the grass seems to be greener on the other side, it doesn't have to be a Mac versus PC or Mac or PC. Mac and PC has worked for me pretty well, and while I wouldn't say these two have the perfect marriage as far as competition is concerned, for my workflow, I would definitely put them both in the friend zone. Till next time, thanks for watching. See you in the next video.